Hello and welcome to the Data for Subscriptions podcast, where we focus on the data and specifically data for subscriptions and as a service businesses. I'm your host, Behdad, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Stephen Hateley, Head of Product Marketing at Digital Route. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Behdad.
So let's concentrate on one of the industries specifically for now then, and that's media and entertainment. And before we dig into the specifics of that industry, challenges, some of the learnings and opportunities, why don't you kind of set the landscape of what kind of modalities and delivery modes do we see?
Yeah, sure. You know, when you talk about video on demand, some people have got, they instantly jump to, the big one, Netflix, mainly because Netflix has been in the news quite recently as well. But we automatically think of Netflix. Now, Netflix are specifically the subscription video on demand. That's the category that they sit within. But there are two other categories which also fit into video on demand. You've got transactional video on demand and you've got ad-based video on demand, which has started to hit the news even more so now, again, on the back of the Netflix discussion. So there's three modes of operation really that need to be considered when you're looking at this type of mode of operation.
And can you explain the difference? And if we start with the subscription base, which is we refer to as what Netflix is doing. So what really signifies that? And then let's move on to as well as the transactional and ad-based.
Yeah, sure. So, if you look at subscription video on demand, or SVOD, as it's quite commonly known, this is really positioned towards regular consumers. So this will be people that want to be able to go downstairs at a certain time of an evening, switch the television on. They're not interested in broadcast television generally. In our house, we rarely put on the broadcast channels these days. We go straight on to Virgin box and we have Virgin TiVo box, and we start looking at what's available on the box office or on the streaming video on demand sort of consumption. So these are kind of the regular consumptions of these type of consumers of this type of content. Typically, the business model that these particular subscribers will be on will be a flat rate subscription, and this has been you've been paying at the same flat rate for a number of years with a lot of these companies. They haven't really increased their cost by massive amounts. So it's quite predictable in this particular model. A lot of their content historically has been provided by content providers. So there's a need for revenue sharing in there, because as people consume that content, then obviously these content providers need to be compensated. But also increasingly, a lot of these SVOD companies have been creating their own content,
right?
As a way to differentiate themselves, and say, listen, we can, we've got the money, we've got the power, we can build out something that's really good. And to be honest, Stranger Things, Narcos, all of these series, which have been produced specifically for these platforms have been a great success.
No, absolutely.
Over time.
That's been part of the Netflix success, so to say, the last few years with tons of content being churned out. So how about transactional?
Transactional is more related to the impulsive viewers, and we all work in all of these modes. Don't let me say you're not one or the other. Generally, everybody's all of these things, all of these personas. But essentially, for transactional video on demand, you're an impulsive viewer. So it means that you will decide you're going to have a Saturday night, you're going to have a meal, and you're basically going to download a movie, something that you haven't seen before. So you'll go on to one of the transactional services and you'll literally buy a film, or you will rent a film for the night or for 48 hours. So this is that sort of mode. There's two modes within this business model. You've got the electronic sell-through mode, which is EST. So this is literally buying digitally and downloading and keeping the content. And then you've got the download to rent model as well. So this is something we're familiar with. You download it and you pay $2.99 for it, and you just have it for 24 hours, so you don't own that content.
Right.
Generally, the content on these particular channels is quite rich because there's a good return. So if you are buying and owning or buying very specifically a piece of content, then the return is good, and the content providers get a good return on their investment. So we tend to see some of the A-list films, being part of the content libraries in transactional VOD.
Who could be a typical player for transactional?
Yeah, companies such as iTunes. So, not talking about Apple TV now, talking specifically about iTunes. Mm-hmm. So you're going to go onto iTunes and buy some content or rent some content, or you go onto Amazon and you buy or rent content from Amazon. It may be that with Amazon, you view that on the Prime platform. Right. So there's a bit of a crossover there, and they are a bit of a hybrid, as are Apple. But yeah, those would be your typical players.
And then you mentioned ad-based.
Yeah, so ad-based is more your casual browsers, I tend to term it as. So these are the people who would normally be happy to watch broadcast television for example. But more recently, they are happy to find other means of getting the freest content they can. Typically this has come from the likes of some of the broadcast companies have got their own channels. So you've got things like All 4 in the UK or ITV Player. The BBC iPlayer is a different case because that's quite uniquely funded, as people in the UK will know because we keep on being reminded. But generally, this is basically content which it exists because it is paid for by the advertisements. So yes, okay, it's like broadcast television on commercial channels where you will have commercial breaks, but it's a similar sort of thing, but for video on demand.
I'm going to come back to this, specifically the ad-based one. I have a few questions with regards to some of the plays that you mentioned, but what are the challenges you see this industry as a whole is facing?
Generally, the biggest challenge is that they tend to, I think they got comfortable, basically. They've built up a subscription base and the view is this is just going to go on and on. It's great. It's a great model, it's constant, perpetual. But now we've reached a point where there are so many other alternatives for getting that media from. And if they involve subscriptions, then people will start looking at, I'm paying an awful lot for all of these subscriptions that I've got. So either they are starting to churn to the other channels because their content is more aligned or more interesting based on their lifestyle and what their preferences are, or or they're moving because they're rationalizing their monthly spend. It's a very real state at the moment with the state of the world economies post-COVID that people are starting to rationalize, what they're spending on entertainment, for example. So
subscription fatigue is something that we've noticed the last year.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the consequences you're talking about, the fact that we in most households, at least in the Western world, have tons of subscriptions. The same thing that we have really enjoyed, which is the simplicity of being served, in this case with content, be it Netflix or Spotify or Disney. Now it seems that people are sitting with maybe 10 plus subscriptions, are not necessarily fully on top of all of their subscriptions, are also not using everything and consequently not seeing the value of what they're paying for.
That's a big point, I think, the value. Yeah, exactly that. I mean, you mentioned Spotify briefly there. So we're not just talking about video providers here and content providers, visual content providers as such. You're talking about subscriptions to gaming, subscription to written media, subscription to music, music subscriptions, and also all of the different video channels that you could. Like you said, I mean, the average household is averaging around about 6 to 10, even more subscriptions per household. So that's it's a big problem in terms of fatigue. Yeah,
but it seems not all are cut the same, because you mentioned Netflix and some of the challenges. I think for most, it hasn't gone by the fact that the company has also reported fairly challengingly. If we look at Disney, though, Disney Plus, they seem to be going another direction. Can you see what they're doing differently between these two players? Why one is having a hard time while the other player equally big, arguably? Not in net subscribers yet, but still.
Yeah, I think Netflix, it's quite widely reported what their challenges have been. There's been an investment imbalance there in terms of investing in really good content, but at the same time not necessarily seeing the return. One of the big problems that was reported was the fact they don't even know what a certain percentage of their subscribers, they don't even know who they are because people are sharing accounts, etc. And it's become a real issue. And I'm sure that's not only for Netflix. I'm sure everybody's experiencing very similar thing. I mean, they put security things in place to make sure you can't reuse a subscription on so many devices, etc. But yeah, I mean, there's always people will always find a fraudulent way to get around these things if it means they haven't got to spend more money.
Yeah, but this is interesting because with Netflix, 1/3 of their subscribers they are expecting not paying, and they sit around 200 million subscribers, which means that's a pretty large portion of users that are not paying. And it's interesting because when you said that we've really enjoyed this kind of service, which has been why these kind of businesses have grown so positively over the last decade, part of it has been that people have shared their accounts, to be very frank. But now the same, let's say, ability is turning out to be a huge problem. What do you see specifically are you seeing anything that Netflix is doing that is about to change that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's been reported what they're doing quite controversially, to the purist users of streaming video on demand. They're actually shifting towards an ad-based tier. Now, it's a split. It really is a split. And, I've seen a number of surveys online posted onto LinkedIn as to what people think of this. Shouldn't they be doing this? And it literally is a 50-50. Oh, I don't mind watching ads if it means I get a cheaper subscription. That's one side of the argument. But then you got the other side of the argument. If I wanted ads, I'd be watching broadcast television. So, this is the balance you've got. It's a case of their unique differentiation as a streaming video on demand or a subscribed video on demand platform is that you can watch our content without the ads. I know that's absolutely my reason for preferring that over a lot of the commercial television and commercial radio, just to add that in, because I get fed up of listening to the advertisements all the time. So I think this is the direction that they've gone. And interestingly, it's not Netflix, or they aren't the only ones who've decided to add the ad-based tier. There are other major providers as well.
Disney has announced as well that they're going to introduce ad-based. I think the fact that they need to introduce different modalities is something of a necessity. But I agree with you. I think that I'm not at least convinced that this is the path to keep customers happy, but time will tell. So if we look at the main challenge that you mentioned, which is churn, in light of that we spoke about subscription fatigue and the fact that we have just too many. Churn can be for many reasons, but one could just be the fact that we just have too many similar type of services and we just don't want anymore. Whether that's because of economic reasons or value for money, maybe a combination of all. So how do you solve for this, Steve?
So, let me put you in a picture. Let me paint a picture here. So I'm the CEO of a company called Cultflix. Okay. So Cultflix is a very specialized company. They focus on niche content. So very specifically bad movies. So the type of movies that you don't really want to sit down and watch if you go to the cinema. They specialise in pulling in these weird titles like the Frog That Ate Mars and these type of titles that you regularly see. However, they do have a cult following. So, the customer base of Cultflix really are people that want to watch these on a regular basis. They have watch parties and then they share their experiences on social media, and it's a bit of a community that they've got. So they're very unique in what they offer, but they do have a loyal customer base. Their strategy, or our strategy in Cultflix is we want to be the leader in alternative streaming. So we want to set ourselves a blue ocean away from what the Netflix is and everybody does with traditional content by becoming a leader in this alternative streaming to create, for this type of market. And then in doing so, obviously we want to grow our content providers. So we want to move away from just having suppliers of content from the US to having suppliers of content from other continents, from Japan and South Korea, etc., and somewhere in Europe. And also longer term, we're looking at diversification of the portfolio. So, we're looking at moving away from just only movies to having a library of gaming, pretty similar to what Netflix are doing, etc., by adding the gaming portfolio. But the type of games that we will have, again, will have the same appeal to the same audience that we have with the alternative audience as such. So that's us as a company. So, but the problem is the sort of challenges that we're facing,
right?
Is at the moment we've got our customer base and our revenue growth has stalled. We've got a regular customer base. That's fine, and we're receiving regular incomes, but there's no growth there. There's no increase in followers or subscribers, and the worry is that eventually our customers will be victims of subscription fatigue, as we mentioned earlier. So there is that churn threat, and to be honest, our competition comes from the mainstream subscribing video on demand providers who have got similar libraries to us in terms of they do host certain content which is alternative or a bit cult, but it's not as extensive as our library. So there is the worry there that could be the churn risk. The other thing with our subscriber base, now the one thing is, in our DNA, we pride ourselves on the fact that, it's uninterrupted viewing. Of our content. So providing ad-based content is not an option for us because we would lose more customers just by adding ads into our content. They come to us for a very specific reason. The other thing that we need to do is, we realize that we need to optimize pay-as-you-view with our content, and pay as you binge. Because people that watch our content, they don't watch it every single day of the week like you would, let's say, the mainstream video providers. They come on Saturdays. It may be one Saturday a month. It may be every Saturday and a Sunday twice a week. You don't know that sort of, viewing patterns. But we need something that's simple and cost effective to attract these audiences to view our content in that particular way. We also need to make sure that our existing subscriber base, who are very loyal, we need to give them something more, because they're not buying any more from us. But if they're loyal, then if we give them something more, they're likely to buy it.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we can refine what we offer and make a better job of the things we're providing already. And then finally, the big challenge that we've got is, as we move towards our strategic vision of growing our content providers and growing the type of content that we actually serve, it's absolutely essential that we perfect our partner settlement process, because there's nothing worse than having more and more content providers and then having days of conflict and resolution that's required because payments haven't been made and compensations, etc. So that's something we definitely need to make sure is top notch before we move forward with a strategy. So in summary, in terms of what do we need as a company, as Cultflix? We need a better understanding of our users. We need to secure our revenues, accurately secure our revenues. We need to improve our customer experiences, and we've got to improve our partner settlements.
So how does the project execution look like if we kind of manage all of that?
The way that I would like to see this tackled as the CEO, there are four main things, really, that I need my solution provider to do for me. The first one is an understanding of customers. Help me understand my customers better. I need a granular understanding of the way and the type of content that's being consumed and when it's being consumed, so that I can then use that in my business processes first and foremost. The second one is, focus on how I can create a light model or a light business model for the low-hanging fruit, basically. How can I attract people to join our platform in a very easy way? So it could be freemium, it could be freemium plus. And, by that I refer to, you can get access to a certain amount of content,
right,
and for free. And all we need from you is your contact details. So obviously you need to be able to gather data. And for us, the business objective behind that one would be to, convert those light subscribers into being full paying premium subscribers over time. I think that's absolutely important as we try and replace any potential churners, for the next generation, to keep our model moving. I think the third thing that needs to be solved here is, we introduce a new tier. So within our premium premium subscribers, we need to offer something extra. We need to give them the opportunity to watch the specific content that they want, have tailored content provided towards them, and make sure that the quality of the content they're viewing is top notch. Because if you're paying a premium subscription, you're expecting a premium service. And then finally, like I said, the partner settlement side, we need a granular assignment of settlement revenues with our partners so that we're fully prepared for the growth of our library and our partnership and content providers.
So what do you need to get this done? Because that's a whole lot that you want to get done, and also maybe you want to add something in terms of time frame when we speak about project execution. What's your time frame that you want to operate in?
I think really, as soon as possible, like every project, every CEO will say that, I need this change, I need it now.
Right.
We need to start seeing the benefits from this. I think a realistic time frame is something within 6 months, definitely, but anything that a solution provider can do for me within a 3-month period would be absolutely marvelous.
So what's prevented you for addressing these areas so far?
I think, it's been highlighted to us, the challenge that we've got is a lot of our data integration that we're using in-house has been in-house created. So we've built basic integrations between various content systems and application systems that we've got, which are feeding more or less directly into our revenue systems, which means that there is no necessarily rich data. It's really just on-off sort of data that's going in there, which doesn't give us a great deal of scope in terms of innovation. So we're looking for a solution which is going to allow us to collect more granular information, of course, but then enrich that data with more knowledge about those particular subscribers, know more about those subscribers so that we can offer them more, basically. So that's really what we're looking for. And of course, we need to consider scale. Our solution is going to scale beyond where it currently is because we're going to add more content and more reach. We also need to make sure that we can handle complexity, because if we're going to have subscribers, we're going to have new business models, we're going to have new tiers, we're going to have subscribers watching as they view, etc. It's important that we understand the granularity that's going on, which is a complex environment. And then, of course, it goes without saying that, the solution needs to provide for the ultimate accuracy, not only for the partner settlements, but also to make sure that we don't suffer from any revenue leakage. We need to understand that we are getting paid for exactly what's being used. And that requires this, like I've said, this granular detail that we need on the data.
So going back to the time frame, what kind of benefits do you expect, let's say, within the next 6 months?
Acting as the CEO of Cultflix, my main concern is to avoid churn, as it is with other providers in this particular industry. And in doing so, I know I need to get a handle on usage data. That is the key to our success, ultimately. I expect to get a move on this by moving away from, like I said, our in-house integrations to a solution that can properly handle, the demands of the future with our particular offering. And in the next 6 months, I expect that we will be able to offer different subscription models and tiers to new and existing customers. I expect to get a deep understanding of content usage, which allows us to provide the ideal user experience to our customers, again, to avoid churn. And then, of course, the big one, not necessarily churn preventative, but certainly to remove the potential for conflicts, we need to make sure that we are accurate and proficient in the way that we handle our partner settlements.
Fantastic.